What's up, my people? Welcome to Fellowship Bible Church's Sermon Spotlight, where we're coming at you each and every week with a fresh weekend of debrief and effort to send biblical truth. What better way to do that than by the power of conversation? I'm one of your hosts, Caleb Pearson. Joining me in the host spotlight, Miss Rose Locke. Rose, how are you?
I knew you were going to say that. I knew that's exactly how it's going to go. You're going to turn to me and say, how are you? I do have some things I want to talk about the sermon, but a more important question is, how are you?
Good.
We've missed you.
Sleepy. Good sleepy.
Yeah. Or good sleepy.
Good to be back.
Tell everybody.
Yeah, missed the church family. So baby boy Charlie is, a month old now, which is crazy. But we're loving it.
That's great.
He's fussy and annoying and lovable and cute and annoying and awesome. So new parents, we love it.
Yeah,
but
and the problem is that one doesn't sleep at night and the other one doesn't sleep during the day,
yeah,
right?
There you go. Oh yeah. But it's been just awesome. I love it. So
glad to hear.
Yeah, very good to be back. Excited for this week, and we got a lot of stuff coming up. The fall's kind of set in for youth and parent summit this weekend, so very cool. But been loving the Christology series we've been on as well. He's back in the podcast booth with us, Mark Gary. Mark, how are you?
I'm fine.
Good.
Yep.
Thanks for being here. Rose, I'll come your way first as we talk about this Incarnation of Christ. There were clearly some worship decisions made on, there's Christmas in October for the first time, I guess, here around the building. So what was that conversation like, and how are we teasing the Christmas season but also not, and making sure we cover this huge element of...
Those are great questions. We had that conversation actually this morning. So we do actually debrief the worship services. I know some ministries don't do a full debrief. We do a full debrief. What went well? What could have gone better? What do we think about how we surrounded the services? And that very question was on our debrief list this morning, is how did we surround it, and how did it work, and was it successful? And I think after a great deal of conversation, we came around to that we think it was successful, because what is Christmas besides a celebration of the Incarnation? And if we don't view Christmas in that light as a celebration of the Incarnation, then we're missing the whole boat of what Christmas is, and we might as well be doing the Santa Claus thing, to be perfectly honest with you. So helping people, even if people, we didn't consciously say that this weekend, but if people even came away with a taste of that, wow, Christmas really is a celebration of the Incarnation, and Mark's call to really consider the mystery and the amazing way that solved our divine dilemma, I think is really important. And hopefully when Christmas does come around, in, by the way, not too much longer, a month or so, we'll actually start Advent, right? A little more than a month. When Christmas does come around, then people will really be considering the Incarnation based on this sermon. So I mean, I think we felt good about the decisions that we made. And for years, we've talked about Hark the Herald Angels Sing specifically, and maybe if you haven't, revisit those words. We actually, one of the first worship services we did as a team for Christmas, we unpacked that hymn. Because there are lines in there veiled in flesh, the Godhead see. It is one of the meatiest traditional Christmas carols. So I think it was a good decision.
Well, I appreciate that, because the first question is, well, wait a second, why are we doing this now? It's not Christmas. But I think there's a second layer to that question of, wait a second, why do we only do it on Christmas?
Amen.
Why are we only focusing on what Jesus is doing then? So I did appreciate that, and even you walking out and just saying Merry Christmas. It's okay, they're aware. Right. We know what we're doing here.
And I'll circle back to that. One of the things we talk about on a worship team a lot is the importance of liturgical calendars, which we at Fellowship Bible Church, we don't celebrate a liturgical calendar in the same way that a Lutheran church or a Methodist church or a Presbyterian church even, they have usually a more codified liturgical calendar than we do here. But we do talk about sometimes the importance of those seasons and festivals, because guess what? If Christmas wasn't here, how often would we talk about the Incarnation of Christ? But because we do have that Christmas season that's ingrained in our culture, we do circle back to that every year. Just like Easter, we do circle back to the resurrection every year. And the importance of seasons and festivals in the Old Testament and seasons and festivals that we celebrate today, and how those help us see a bigger picture of God. I'm so sorry, this is not about worship, and you guys are both sitting there looking at me that way.
Just like, oh, wow, interesting. Yeah.
And it's always good to be reminded of that other angel that we always forget about at Christmas. Herald. Hark, the herald angel sings.
Yeah.
So
needs a little credit.
more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Can we go more?
He gets
straight?
lonely in heaven.
Can I just say something? I just have a few notes here. I want to say, this is a
really.
this is a Christology
By the way, I like
series.
the pen in the ear thing. Really
Yeah.
looks really.
Yeah.
This is a Christology series. And one of the things you expressed, Mark, was your concern about it becoming too academic in a sense, because it's a theological study, right? But I think that on Sunday, we actually got a class in soteriology. And I use that word knowing a lot of people might not know what it means, because I just want to list for everybody here, like the words that I heard you use in your sermon, Mark, that are important theological concepts that we often don't know the meaning of. And you unpacked them so brilliantly. And those words were incarnation, redemption, justification, impeccability, the hypostatic union, and you even used the word efficacious. And so I just think that this sermon, when it comes to the study of salvation and the meaning of some words that we throw around in Christendom, I just think that it was just really impactful in helping us understand those theologies. So I'm very thankful for that.
We'll wait till next week, because then we're going to talk about propitiation, reconciliation. There's a
when
lot.
does imputation happen? Because I think imputation is really important, and that's one of the things I jotted down here. Is that is a word you didn't talk about, but I think was present.
That's just
So,
coming.
but that's a question for you, Mark. Is that a tension? Because I feel like on a certain degree, you're looking at this material and you're going, okay, how do I? It's not a full Christmas message, but here's where I want to go. But you can't get into all these words. So what was it like to plan for this weekend specifically?
But I think he did a good job.
Right. How am I gonna? What am I going to mention? What am I going to wait on? We had a whole week on pre-incarnation and all this other stuff. So I don't know. Clue us in on what it was like to plan.
Well, this was the big idea of just the incarnation. Again, it was building off a couple weeks ago of the humanity of Christ. So it was taking the idea that God became a man, the incarnation, and trying to figure out how could that come about, and what are the implications of that for us today in the big overarching, because you can't get too much into the weeds. I mean, virgin birth. Yeah, I mean, you could spend. There's a guy by the name of J. Gresham Machen wrote a whole book on the virgin birth of Christ, and it's a classic on the virgin birth of Christ. So it was just getting into that just a little bit. I wanted to also emphasize how, and that's how the sermon started with, was how the Old Testament ship sails on a bloody sea, and that all through there that whole sacrificial system implies that a payment is needed. The incarnation was the answer to an ineffective, it's not possible for the blood of bulls and goats. So the humanity's sinfulness, there is no resolve to that apart from the incarnation. And so I wanted to build up to the need. God's answer to that was the incarnation. But how does that work? How is it possible? Virgin birth that ensured the impeccability of Christ, not just his sinlessness, but his inability to sin. And that resulted in a perfect redemption and payment for us. So that was kind of the flow of it. But it was obviously big picture, still.
Yeah.
Yeah, I liked one of the other things I jotted down that I think was really kind of, you used a word that in your sermon that we don't use in the same way all the time, and that's the word base. And you said that the base nature of Jesus was divine. And it struck me because when we often use that word base, referring to someone's nature or referring to someone's condition, not the baseball base, or not the my home
our wonderful
location.
English language.
Right, but rather when we use the word base to describe a human being, what we're saying in essence, and I looked it up because I knew the connotation was negative, but we're saying that they have a lack of decency, that they're contemptible. We're saying that they're selfish. And so I just thought it was just this little kind of quick thing you said in your sermon, but I was like, how cool of a contrast when we describe the base of Christ, we're describing deity. But when we call a human being base, we're saying that they're selfish and self-centered and fallen. Yeah. And I just thought that just kind of made me think even more about our depravity and our separation from God and the impossibility of that.
And that's what protects Christ's base nature from being humans' base nature. It was his divine nature. And so that's one of the questions I even had after both sermons in the Sunday morning service, was just wondering, still struggling with that Jesus, the impeccability, that he was unable to sin. Because for some people, they want Jesus to have been able to have sinned, and he was strong enough that he didn't. But again, because his foundational base nature is divinity, he's not a deified man. He's God, divine, who took on flesh and blood, a human nature at a point in time, continues that. So his foundational nature of deity guarantees that he could not have sinned. That and then of course the virgin birth. Now, I don't understand how that worked. In order to be a man, to come into this world in its full humanity,
right,
he needed a womb to be implanted in and be birthed from. It's not that Mary's sinful nature was passed on to Jesus. She provided the safety of the womb, in a sense, to make all that happen. And she birthed them. Of course, Roman Catholicism struggled with that and says, well, you know what? In order to make this work, we better kind of deify Mary.
Right.
The immaculate
Mother Mary
conception of, for Mary too. And so if that whole Mariology thing, they've got to do something with it if you're going to elevate Mary up to that point. So we don't have to do that. She was the handmaiden who God chose, through whom his whole incarnation process was birthed. Of course, some would say, well, why not just go ahead and show up as a 30-year-old, 33-year-old man and go ahead and die tomorrow, and then come and die and do it. And there is something, I never got into this, but there is something about the whole sacrificial lamb thing that I think it ties to Judaism, the selection of the lamb, that it would be observed, spotless, no defect. And that's what actually the life of Christ was, and especially the final week where he's being questioned. It's like the religious leaders are checking him over to make sure there must be some spot and blemish. But he had that whole 33 years of his life lived to show his full humanity, to perfectly be the substitute completely for humanity. And that's how God designed it. It wasn't come on Thursday night, be crucified on Friday, I'll raise you on Sunday, and you can come home to heaven.
Well, and there is that goes to your applications then, I think, Mark, because when you see how Christ walked as he faced the temptations in the wilderness, or as he faced the Pharisees, or as he came upon the woman at the well, when you see how he walked, it helps us understand your application of he can sympathize with us, right? Because he was hungry. He
and
was
the full gamut
homeless.
of it, from birth to,
yeah.
Yep.
Which could not have happened between Thursday
and
right. Sunday.
and you brought up Hebrews
right.
multiple times, but that's in Hebrews. We don't have a high priest who's unable to sympathize, and he could have come down in an alien pod and did his thing real quick.
Yeah.
And I've had people ask me before or talk about the gospel.
If you came down in an alien pod, did they ask you that?
That's what it seems like. Well, they'll say, "Oh, well, Jesus knew he was going to come back to life, so he didn't God didn't really die. He didn't really take on death. It was all a trick. It was a puppeteering trick. But you look at the humanity of Christ and how he entered the world and left it and came back and all this stuff. It's like, it's authentic.
And that's why it's good to wrestle with things like the hypostatic union and try to understand these things. And I don't apologize for throwing out terms like that and whatever, as long as we just don't throw it out there for the sake of,
Right.
oh, look at the term I know.
Right. Yeah.
But we unpack it practically.
Yeah, I also appreciated, remind me Martin Luther's nemesis, his name?
Erasmus.
Erasmus, yeah. I appreciated you pointing out this idea that if we can somehow understand it, or if we can think our way to it, if we can do that, then somehow God isn't as big as a God needs to be. So it's kind of this funny thing where it's really hard to understand the hypostatic union. I had a conversation with some folks. It's hard for me to really get my brain entirely wrapped around the Trinity, to be perfectly honest with you guys. And I think that idea that's really a good thing. It's a good thing that this is hard for us. Because
beware the man that says, I fully understand the Trinity.
Yeah. Or if we can think ourselves to God. So now if we can think ourselves to God, okay, now we're in humanism, right? We're somehow humans, and science and all those things can create that. And we lose the mystery and we lose the size and awesomeness of who God is if we can fully comprehend all of these big theological terms.
Well, that's the beauty of Scripture. Do we understand it all? No. But can we understand enough? Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's in there. The call is clear. What we can rely on is clear. The opportunity for faith is clear. And it's studying stuff like this. I'm currently in a soteriology class in seminary, and it's a 16-week class. Most of my classes are 8 weeks. And I had studied soteriology under Don Den Hartog years ago.
We still haven't defined the term.
Study of salvation, to be saved. What does that mean, and how is that word save used? Soterios. But I remember thinking, why is this class 16 weeks instead of 8? Now I know why. There's a lot there to that, and they're diving into all of it, and so it's been so good to do that again on a certain degree.
Can I ask a question about that class?
Yeah.
Just out of curiosity.
Yeah.
So I did before I came here, I wanted to look up the term and make sure I was using the term correctly. And so I did look up the term soteriology, and it did say, I didn't dig, I just read a definition. And the definition I read basically said the study of salvation from different religions is what it said. So my question to you is the class specifically about the study of salvation inside the Christian?
Yes.
Or is it like
biblical.
It's biblical
soteriology.
soteriology. Okay, thanks.
Yep. How is the word used and when, and how can we develop a true understanding of salvation in the Christian life would be the nature of the class. But yeah. Anyway, it's just it tied in well, as you were saying, this week.
And if you want a simple definition, all other soteriologies are I did it.
Right.
And Christian soteriology is God did it. And that's it.
Yeah, and I was thinking, like, I've had the opportunity to share the gospel with people a couple times, and one of the things I talk to them about is the idea that I believe God had to come to us. And most of these other religions, you have to think your way. You have to do something to get to God. And if God is as big as I need my God to be, He had to come to us.
And that was that was my first encouragement, is that not only is there a God in heaven who loves us, but He's wise and powerful enough to figure this out.
Right.
And that He did. And the goal was so that we don't just in a kind of a cavalier, laissez-faire mentality of our salvation. I wanted, at least for a few moments on Sunday and Saturday night, to have people really wrestle with, or at least come to grips with, think about the reality that there is no way we could have figured this out. And we would be on a one-way course to hell, because there's absolutely nothing we could have done. Only God could have done this, and He did. And it's a miracle. I use the illustration of the Apollo 13 thing.
Figure it out.
To put that type of brain power to get these guys back into safety, safely back on Earth, infinitely more challenging was to get us into heaven. And God did that.
I thought about you, Caleb, when the movie reference came up, because it's hard to listen to one of your sermons without there being at least one movie reference. And so I appreciated the movie reference. I thought Caleb's going to appreciate the movie reference.
I was doing my best Caleb Pearson imitation.
I didn't know it was one of your favorite movies, but no, the image stuck.
It is gripping. So if we can walk away, if we need to ponder these things like the incarnation, like the hypostatic union. We get so caught up in the things of life, and we'll spend more time thinking about where my kid is going to go to college, or how am I going to pay for this, or where we're going to spend vacation, than we do on the things that really matter eternally, like how did God pull this off, and what's involved in the incarnation. And so again, going back to the original question, that was kind of where the thinking process was in shaping the message, to get us to think of the greatness of God and be encouraged by that. That if he could figure that out, you know what, you can rest assured he can figure anything out that we have. Just go to him. So not only that, and I mentioned that alone would be wonderful, but we get thrown in that he sympathizes with us. To have the incarnation meant that he became a man and he understands what we're going through. So that's just like an added benefit. So who do we turn to in the moments that we wrestle and we get feeling blue or downcast, or we feel like we're in an insurmountable issue? Well, why not to the one who's been there?
Right, and imagine worshiping a God who is all-powerful and all-knowing and never had that ability to relate to us in that way, right? And so now, we can ignore him because he doesn't really understand.
Yeah.
So the fact that he really does understand our homelessness, I appreciated that, Mark, or our hunger from the 40 days in the wilderness.
Yeah, and it's not that, and because there was no lack in God prior to the incarnation.
Right.
But there's no verse in the Old Testament that says he sympathizes in our weaknesses, yet without sin, because that couldn't have happened until there was the incarnation and humanity. So that's another thing that we can struggle with and say, well, so did God learn? Well, Jesus, it said, learned obedience to the things he suffered. So in that, there we are, that humanity part is fascinating, even though in the divine part, there was no lack of that understanding. But so we can rest assured that be at peace knowing Jesus understands my situation. So why not go to him? And then to realize that he's God, and therefore nothing, as Gabriel said to Mary, nothing's going to be impossible. And I didn't get into it, but Mary's response, and that really is a Christmas message, I guess, but Mary's response, she didn't know. She didn't figure it out. And I kind of jokingly said, I don't know, even Gabriel knew it out. Like, just throw the Holy Spirit in there. It'll solve it'll be a good answer. But Mary let it go at that. How can this be? And she didn't stop and say, well, okay, hold it. Tell me about this overshadowing thing. How does that work? And, she just said, be it done unto me according to, and we sang the Magnificat, the song. I thought I should mention that even in the sermon. You know what we just sang? But did people know it's right from Luke chapter 1? But she sang that expression of faith, be it done unto me according to your will. And she rested in that.
And not just, really the Magnificat. She didn't just sing, be it done unto me. She sang, may you be glorified in the process, right? Which is just the next, it wasn't this like, just,
my soul shall magnify the Lord.
Yes.
And that was her response. And I think God gives us enough information, virgin birth, incarnation, impeccability. He gives us information, but it's enough for us to respond like Mary responded. And if that doesn't satisfy you, well, my response is, Well, so what?
Right.
If God wanted you to figure it out more, he would have given us more information. But he gave us enough for us to be and live our life at rest and at peace
And we have
and
that.
not in turmoil.
And we have that passage of, Thomas, I'm going to have to touch your
Yeah.
wounds. Mary could have responded, this will not be until I fully understand it.
Yeah, yeah,
It's just
yeah,
not.
yeah.
That's not the case.
No, and she just gave such a wonderful response. That could have been easily another application or encouragement of how Mary responded to these incredible God created ideas of an incarnation. Now, Mary struggled when Jesus was out there doing miracles, and it was like, get the boy off the street. The guy's nuts. Get him home. But I think we should walk away with great encouragement in the kind of God that we have, who would go to that length. And we'll see that even more next week, or this coming weekend, when we talk about the death of Christ and all that was accomplished in that.
It's good. It's a fun one, Rose, this series. Is it a fun one for you and your team?
Yeah, it is. It really is a fun one for me and my team. And I think, at least personally, it's been really challenging to me to really sit and behold Christ. And sometimes I find myself I have a struggle, whatever it might be, financial, emotional, whatever the struggle is. And I find myself pleading with God and saying, God, I just want to behold Jesus in this moment. I want to take my eyes off myself. I want to take my eyes off economics. I want to take my eyes off politics. I want to take my eyes
Simple
off
objective.
Emotions, and I want to gaze at you and see you. And so to me, I think that has been the important takeaway that I've had from this series. It's just a desire to really see Jesus.
Yeah. And a credit to FBC congregation, because I have gotten so many comments just like that. That's what is valuable about this whole series. People have expressed is that it is so wonderful just to behold him, just to swim in Jesus and a little more depth week by week, and carry them through the week as they think and ponder on these things. People are responding to this, and like this past week with these encouragements that. I had lots of people come up and say that how those truths are encouraging them. Not that we don't think about those things or don't know them, but a sermon series like this just helps refocus, resharpen sometimes these truths, and Jesus is well worth our time to focus on.
It's good. So we're going to keep doing it then.
Yep.
Mark, thanks for being here, buddy. Rose, I appreciate it.
Thank
you
you
very much. For all our listeners and viewers, remember that we love to hear from you. You can send over your thoughts, questions, or comments at fbcva.org/podcast, and be sure to check out our other 2 podcast channels as well. The fact of the matter, everybody, is that sermons are not meant to just take an hour, but rather transform a lifetime. Until next week, much love. God bless.